Hey folks, I'm Chris and I'm your Commander Mechanic, and today we're going to be tuning up the Virtue and Valor Precon from Wilds of Eldraine. Thank you all for joining me, and we are going to do an in-depth breakdown of this Precon. But before we get to that, I want to thank my incredible sponsors that you can see down at the bottom of the screen. First of all, Face to Face Games, Canada's largest retailer for singles and sealed product for TCGs ranging from Magic to Lorcana and everything in between. Go over there and use my promo code MECHANIC for 5% off of every order. Your first order, your last order, your next order, whatever it is. Use my code MECHANIC for 5% off. And then, of course, thank you very much to Moxfield, my incredible sponsor, who I do all of my brewing in, and you can find all of my decks in. Check out the description below for a link to my profile where you can find this tune-ups deck list, as well as all of my cool brews from Wilds of Eldraine, stretching back years at this point. Now, I want to do an in-depth breakdown of this precon. I want to take a look at some of the reprint value in here. I want to take a look at some of the new cards in here. We're going to take a look at what works and what doesn't work, some of the pitfalls of a deck that revolves around auras, like this one does, and then what we can add to it to kind of kick it up a notch. All right, amazing. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the price of the individual cards in the deck. What's new, what's existing, and where the value lies. All right, so you can see here, per Moxfield, we're sitting at about $112 of current value in the deck. That's pretty okay based on the $45 price tag of this precon. I've actually seen it going for a little bit lower as well, just because the Fade Dominion precon is seemingly much preferred. But $112 worth of value between the new cards and the existing cards is pretty okay. But where is the value in the deck? Let's take a look at everything over $5 and see what kind of cool stuff we've got. So the first is our first unique commander, Elevir of the Wild, the Wild Court, a 4-mana 4/4 human knight. This is one of the unique commanders for the deck. So naturally, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but you can see here, only about $5. Our second unique commander in the deck, Gilwain, Casting Director, is a little bit less expensive than that. It says $8 here, but when I click on it, it says $3. So even that, not very much. Umbra Mystic, a good reprint, over $5. Again, in an aura themed deck, you can't get much better than Umbra Mystic. Auras attached to permanents you control have totem armor, meaning that if the enchanted creature would die, you destroy the aura instead. Not bad. Okay. We'll take a look at some of the new cards in a minute, but Retether is another expensive one. Quote unquote expensive, about $4.50. But it's a sorcery that returns all aura cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, and only creatures can be enchanted this way. So if you've got non-creature enchantments, this one doesn't really help. We've got Rishkar's Expertise, a stalwart, for card draw in green at about $2. And then Daybreak Coronet, Legacy All-Star Daybreak Coronet, used in the Boggles archetype in Eternal formats. But enchant creature with another aura enchanted to it. Enchanted creature gets +3/+3, has first strike, vigilance, and lifelink. Again, in an aura-centric deck, where your commanders are pumping out auras for your creatures, Daybreak Coronet is very, very good. Then we've got Bear Umbra. Bear Umbra, a little over $5. Why is this over $5? Well, it's part of an infinite combo. If any of you have seen the CEDH builds of Nigila the Blade Blossom, getting anything that allows you to untap your lands on combat damage, or sorry, this is just on attack, not necessarily on combat damage, can net you infinite combat phases, thanks to Nigila's ability to pay 5, untap your creatures, they get lifelink, trample, take an extra combat. That's the only reason why Bear Umbra is really that expensive, but in this deck, it's still good value. All right. We've got some other new cards like Mantle of the Ancients that we'll take a look at in a second. But then we've got what is probably the most expensive card in the deck, out of the box at least. It's Hall of Heliod's Generosity. This non-basic land lets you pay 2 and tap it to put an enchantment card from your graveyard on top of your library. Easy peasy. It's a good one, and in any deck that runs a lot of enchantments, not necessarily auras, it's great. But in a deck like this, where you're looking to rebuy some of your best auras, it's a must-have. One of the reasons why it's a must-have is that the aura strategy overall is a little weak. I say it's a little weak because auras open you up for 2-for-1. 2-for-1s are a phrase that we use in Magic when somebody can take one action, spend one spell, make an attack, and destroy 2 of your resources. So if I use a Terror to destroy target creature, or a Doomblade, rather, thank you, Generations, to destroy target creature, and it's got an aura on it, I have spent one spell and I have destroyed your creature and your aura. That hurts from a value standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint. So being able to rebuy some of those enchantments that might be incidentally destroyed means that your entire game plan isn't out the window when you get blown out by a board wipe. You get to rebuy some of your best auras. All right. Now, with that being said, I want to take a look at some of the new cards in the deck, including the commanders here, and see how they actually help shore up some of those deficiencies. I think that role tokens in particular, these auras that they create, which we'll take a look at, are actually really good for the aura strategy. It means that we're creating disposable auras. The big challenge is that normally you spend mana on an aura that can be destroyed when the enchanted creature is destroyed. When we're looking at things like role tokens, like with Elevere of the Wild Court here, it's much easier to be okay with losing one of these token auras because it doesn't cost you a spell and it doesn't cost you mana. That's the big swap in efficiency here. So, what does Elevere of the Wild Court do for you? Well, she's a 4 mana 4/4 human knight, and whenever she enters the battlefield or attacks, you create a virtuous role token and attach it to another target creature you control. So the way that roles work is that you can only have one role token attached to a creature at a time. If a second role token gets attached to them, you put the other one into the graveyard. Not sacrifice it, not destroy it, simply put it into the graveyard. Then the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. Then whenever an enchanted creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This is very, very good. All right. So again, she's creating disposable roles for your board. If you have 3 creatures and you have entered the battlefield and attacked with Elevere or cast an aura on one of your creatures, suddenly each of your creatures are getting +3/+3 because 3 enchantments. This counts for non-aura enchantments too. If you have pillow fort effects like a Ghostly Prison or a Sphere of Safety, your creatures with this role on them get +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. And in green and white, being a card draw engine, so whenever an enchanted creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. That is card advantage in the command zone. We talked about this with the Fey Dominion Precon, but card advantage in the command zone helps your game plan infinitely. Being able to reliably draw cards because you've got a card draw engine in the command zone is incredible. And in the case of Elevere here, when she enters the battlefield, if you throw this roll onto an evasive creature with trample or with flying, you can immediately draw a card the turn she comes into play. Really, really good. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Mr. B, JJ Mickey, Joel. Yes, tutors in the command zone are pretty good as well. Yes. All right. So yes, there are a lot of good upsides to Elevere. She's all right, but by definition, she kind of wants you to go wide. Normally, an aura strategy like you see on Light Paws, for instance, want you to go tall. Stack all of your auras on a single creature to make them very big and near unassailable. Elevere, on the other hand, makes your creatures bigger for each other enchanted creature, or each other enchantment you control. But because you can only attach one role to a creature at a time, if you want to make the most of her ability to make rolls, you need multiple creatures. So, a go wide auras deck. An interesting concept. But she is not the only new legend in the deck. In fact, we have one of my favorites, Giltwain Casting Director. Giltwain is a 3 mana 2/3 human bard. Whenever Giltwain Casting Director or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you give it a roll. The Royal roll, Sorcerer roll, or the Monster roll. What do these do? That's a great question. We don't see that on the card, but I think I can pull up what roll is. Roll reversal, maybe not. Maybe not. The sorcerer, the royal roll gives the enchanted creature +1/+1 and ward 1. The sorcerer roll is +1/+1, and when it attacks, you scry 1. And the monster roll uh, gives it +1/+1 and trample. God, big brain. I remember all of that from up here. Good. All right. But Giltwain immediately enchant creatures as they enter the battlefield. This is a big plus. This is a big, big plus. If you are going wide with your creatures, as this deck wants to do, this is a great way to ensure that you have an enchantment on everything. But you can't use a token strategy with Giltwain because it is non-token creature entering the battlefield, meaning you're going to want to be casting your creatures or returning them from the graveyard. This is a very interesting growth to the auras archetype here. Very interesting expansion of the design space. And I think it's a great way to make smaller creatures much bigger utility. You can easily go with very, very small creatures. The 1/1s, the 1/2s, the 1/3s. And you can pump them up and give them extra abilities. Very, very easy. Muffins, yes, the rolls are enchantment tokens. So we can take a look at the reminder text here on Elevere. If you control another role, put an enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. The virtuous roll, all of the rolls are token enchantments. Very interesting. Very interesting. Are there any reprints that can be commanders here? Great question, Mr. B. I think that there are a few that can work here. One of my favorites would be Siona, Captain of the Pyleus. She is in the 99 of this brew. So she's a 3 mana 2/2, and when she enters the battlefield, you look at the top 7 cards of your library, reveal an aura, and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And whenever an aura you control becomes attached to a creature you control, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Okay? There is a 2-card infinite combo with Siona. Shielded by Faith. This is the one. Shielded by Faith, 3 mana, enchanted creature has indestructible. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you may attach Shielded by Faith to that creature. So the way that this works with Siona is that when that aura enters the battlefield, you attach it to a creature and you make a 1/1. Then you move that aura to the 1/1, making a 1/1 because an aura has become attached to a creature you control. And what you do is you just, with these two, end up making infinite 1/1s. You keep passing Shielded by Faith to the new creature, making a new creature, pass Shielded by Faith to it, and you make infinite 1/1s. 2-card infinite combo. That's one of the reasons Siona makes a very strong commander to a deck, because she tutors for the other half of this card. Yeah, exactly, Beal. Don't get blown out by Rakdos Charm if that's the case. But do have some kind of haste enabler, like a Concordant Crossroads, so that you can then attack with this infinite 1/1 army that you're creating. If you've got something that lets you draw a card whenever a creature enters the battlefield, uh, then this one gets a lot better because you can go digging into your deck. Right? But very, very good. I think that she's a fine pivot commander in this list, especially if you're going for the infinite combo. Now, Shielded by Faith is not in this list. We might look to add it to this list, especially if Siona and Shielded by Faith are in the 99 rather than Siona being in the command zone. We wouldn't want an infinite combo to be too consistent after all. But if you were to move Siona to the command zone, that's certainly a way that you could go with it, for sure. All right. So those are the two brand new commanders, Gilwain and Elevir. But we've got a few brand new cards in the list too. And I want to take a look at them and see how good they are. Should you be picking them up, or should you be picking this Precon up just for these unique cards? And this starts with Knick Knack Oof. Oofy. Oof. Oof. Knick Knack Oof. Oofy. Is an X green Oofy for 1/1. Enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of aura cards with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then put all cards revealed this way that weren't put onto the battlefield onto the bottom of your library in a random order. This is a Genesis wave for auras. Very, very interesting. Okay? This is great if you're looking to do, say, an Alpha Strike with a board that you have built up, because these auras don't have to go onto Knick Knack Oof. They can go onto your other creatures. So if you've got 3 or 4 creatures on the battlefield and you power out a Knick Knack Oof for 8 mana, well, you could potentially be putting a handful of auras directly onto the creatures that are capable of attacking right now, so that you can go into the red and get some good damage in. Perfectly fine, but very narrow in terms of the decks that I would put this in. Is it worth picking up? If you've got an Auras deck that you want to bulk up, Knick Knack Oof is a slam dunk for it. Muffins, that is a big oof. Absolutely. All right. Some of the other new ones in here. We've also got Loam Crafter Fawn. So Loam Crafter Fawn is a 3-mana 3/3 Satyr Druid. When Loam Crafter Fawn enters the battlefield, you may discard 1 or more land cards. When you do, return up to that many non-land permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. Loam Crafter Fawn is what Eternal Witness wishes it was. Loam Crafter Fawn is what the snake wishes that it was. You and an opponent both return a permanent from your graveyard to your hand, or card from your graveyard to your hand. Skullwinder, thank you, Muffins. Loam Crafter Fawn is fantastic, and I think that Loam Crafter Fawn is a card that you probably want in a few decks. Yes, you need to have lands in your hand, but if you want to essentially cash in a handful of land cards that you've got in your grip for cards to rebuy from the graveyard, Loam Crafter Fawn is incredible. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing this card reprinted several times. I wouldn't be surprised if we see this in a next Commander-centric reprint set, for instance. Or we start seeing it pop up in green Commander decks from here on out. It is a great card. Absolutely. Proxy, I see you. See you, buddy. See you. But yes, Loam Crafter Fawn, really good card. Absolutely. Okay, that's one that you definitely want. All right. What else do we have in terms of new cards? Well, we've got Ox Drover. Ox Drover is a 4 mana 4/4 human peasant. You can see it, this guy riding that ox. But he's a vigilance, can't be blocked by oxen creature. And whenever Ox Drover enters the battlefield or attacks, target opponent creates a 2/4 white ox creature token, and you draw a card. You're giving cows out to people here. And your Ox Drover can't be blocked by them. Now, I would really prefer if those oxen were goaded, personally. But it's still good if you want to be handing out favors to friends. Andy, welcome, my friend. Thank you very much for the sub with Prime. Appreciate it. Really do. Thank you. But Ox Drover's fun. I don't think that it's good, and I don't think that it's necessary in this build. But there are going to be ways to use and abuse this, especially if you're giving out oxes to people, and you want to do things that key off of the number of creatures that your opponents control. Being able to give them a 2/4 ox every turn and draw a card with this, it's white card draw, but this is probably the worst form of white card draw you can get. Again, it's a neat card, but it's not fantastic. Okay. What else we have in here, though, is Liberated Livestock. This is a 6 mana 4/6 cat bird ox. Okay, get that, cat bird ox. When Liberated Livestock dies, you create a 1/1 white cat with lifelink, a 1/1 white bird with flying, and a 2/4 white ox. Then, for each of those tokens, you put an aura card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield attached to it. Again, really good. Okay, this is good even if you ignore this last line of text. For each of those tokens, you may put an aura card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield attached to it. If this was just 6 mana, when it dies, you make 3 creatures, this would be really good in all sorts of aristocrat strategies. Okay, this would be fantastic in anything like a Teysa Karlov deck, where creatures dying doubles up on triggers, and then where your tokens get vigilance and lifelink. I think without even this last line of text, this card belongs in a lot of those archetypes. With this last line of text, even if you have incidentally an aura or 2 in your deck, you get to rebuy them from the graveyard or from your hand. Really great. Yeah, as a lot of you are pointing out, Eldrazi Conscription is a perfectly viable option here. What you can do is make sure you've discarded the Eldrazi Conscription, sacrifice the Liberated Livestock, and you can throw that Eldrazi Conscription onto this 1/1 white bird with flying. So suddenly you've got an 11/11 flying Eldrazi bird with Annihilator 4 on it. I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. Cheating out a 10 mana aura, Eldrazi Conscription, is really good. Let's pull that up. Oh, not Constipation, Conscription. Eldrazi Conscription, 8 mana. Aura, 10/10, Trample, and Annihilator 2. That's the one. So again, you basically get a mini Emrakul. Yeah, you get a Emrakul we have at home, right? A Kirkland brand Emrakul, if you will, by sacrificing the Liberated Livestock. Right? I think that this is really good. I think that this is really good. I think that Liberated Livestock, even at a 6 mana price tag, just making 3 creatures when it dies is good enough for it to see play in multiple brews. Cheating the auras back out from your hand or from the graveyard, really good. Really good. Love that one. Okay. One of the next new cards is Unfinished Business. This is a 5 mana sorcery, and it's return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Then return up to 2 target aura or equipment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to that creature. Wow. Wow. All right, this one would have been good if it just said auras. Okay, but the fact that it is an unconditional reanimation spell, meaning it's not target creature with mana value 3 or less from the graveyard, right? It's not target creature with power 2 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. It's target creature, any target creature. And then 2 auras attached to it would have been perfectly fine. But the fact that it's also equipment cards from the graveyard to the battlefield attached to it is fantastic. Normally, for unconditional reanimation in white, you would be paying 4 mana for this. 4 mana. For just 1 extra mana, you're rebuying 2 extra cards from the bin. I think that this is fantastic. This is definitely a card to get. It's currently going for a little less than $4, but if you've got a white deck and you ever struggle with, somebody's blown up my aura's enchantments, or maybe you just walked into an austere command and you've had your creatures with power 3 or greater blown up, and you've had your artifacts blown up, Unfinished Business undoes all of the damage. I think that it's great. Yeah, already I see you out there, fam, saying Teshar, Preston. Absolutely. In white decks, this is great. This is a fantastic card. Pick that one up if you get the opportunity to. Right now, again, it's just a couple of bucks. I think people are really going to clue into how good it is. So if you can pick it up at that price, that $3-4 mark, grab a single. And make sure to use my promo code at Face to Face Games Mechanic to get 5% off of your order. The rest of the new cards in the deck are auras. All right. So we've got a few in here. So we've got where is it now? Bear Umbra, Sage's Reverie, Songbird's Blessing. That's the one I want. Okay. Sorry, Retether is a reprint out there, team. Mr. B. Talked about this when we talked about some of the value cards in here, but it's return each aura card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Only creatures can be enchanted. So it's a one-time open the vault, let's say. Okay? But in terms of new cards, we've got Songbird's Blessing. This is a 4-mana aura, unsurprisingly, enchant creature. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an aura card. You may put that card onto the battlefield. If you don't, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is a 4-mana aura that goes and cheats out more auras. There are a few creatures that do this, but I think that this one is really good. Okay? Again, you need to make sure that you're not getting 2 for 1. So you aren't throwing Songbird's Blessing onto a creature only to have that creature die in combat or be removed by a targeted removal spell or a board wipe. But the longer you have that creature out, the more value this generates. And in a deck where you want to be cheating out, auras rather than paying for them, or where your card advantage might not be quite to the level that you want, being able to cheat auras out like this is great. We talked about Eldrazi Conscription, which is probably going in this list. But you can cheat out an Eldrazi Conscription. All right? Keep in mind that you won't immediately get the attack trigger, but you can put it on the attacking creature. So you aren't going to get that Annihilator trigger because the creature has already been declared as an attacker. But if you put this on one of your attacking creatures, suddenly you've got +10/+10 in trample coming at your opponent. Really good. Absolutely fantastic. Okay. There's a creature that does the same thing. I don't know if it's in the deck by default, but it's Armored Sky Hunter. We'll take a look at that for adds to the deck. Does basically the same thing on attack for auras or equipment. All right. Really good. And Mantle of the Ancients is not new. It is a reprint. But it is one of the more valuable cards in the deck. Okay. When it enters the battlefield, return any number of target aura or equipment cards that could be attached to enchanted creature from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to it. And then enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each aura and equipment attached to it. It's essentially ethereal armor and retether all in one. Real good card. Okay. Verdant Embrace is not a new one either. Uh, yeah. So a few good new cards in here. I think in terms of must-haves, if you're looking at this for the new cards, then Unfinished Business and Loamcrafter Fawn are the ones that you want to be picking up as single, hands down. All right, that's my professional opinion. Okay, so uh, that brings us to what works and what doesn't work in this deck. Okay, one of the challenges in this deck in particular is that we are an aura-centric deck that wants to be going wide with non-token creatures. We've got 21 enchantments in the deck. Almost all of them are auras. In fact, I think all of them are auras. And we've got 30 creatures. Personally, I think that we're too heavy on the creatures and that there are a few enchantments that we could be including. Okay, now we've got some great creatures in this list. Don't get me wrong. Destiny Spinner is incredible. Destiny Spinner gets played in CEDH. Creature and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. If you've got a pesky blue mage in your group, tell them because they ain't doing anything to you. But then also it lets you turn your lands into creatures with trample and haste, where X is the number of enchantments you control. Being an enchantment itself, absolutely fantastic card. Okay, we've got mana dorks, however, like Paradise Druid in the deck. So Paradise Druid has hexproof as long as it's untapped. Okay, and then taps to add 1 mana of any color. This is a halfway between what we really want to be seeing. Ideally, what we want is we want our creatures to always have hexproof so that our opponents can't blow us out with 2-for-1, with targeted removal. So 1/1 and 1/2, or sorry, 1 mana and 2 mana creatures that have hexproof by default are what we want. We don't want a creature that the moment we attack with it is going to lose hexproof and going to be able to be blown up. And if we want a mana dork, well, we can pay 1 mana for a mana dork as opposed to 2. So Paradise Druid is halfway between what we really want. And in my opinion, not really worth it in the list. We've got other fantastic value engines in the list like Sanctum Weaver, which is going to make you just a boatload of mana. If you want to be casting that knick-knack oof, where X equals just all of the mana in the world, Sanctum Weaver is what's going to help you with that. Because it's add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of enchantments you control. Easy enough. It being an enchantment itself, this is the kind of mana dork we want. Easy enough. Do we have a mana sink for all that mana? We absolutely do in Knick-Knack Oof, at very least. If we want to be hard casting an Eldrazi Conscription, then yes, we absolutely do. If we want to cast some of these 5 and 6 mana and 7 mana value creatures, amazing. What's the budget for this upgrade? Well, ideally, we're going to add in about $50 to this. Maybe less, depending on what we cut. Okay? Yeah, even if there's not a mana sink, just being able to have the freedom to cast multiple spells in a turn ahead of your opponents is a big plus. Okay? Now, one of the things that we have in here, rather than mana dorks, are discounters. Okay? So we've got the Jukai Naturalists. We've got the Starfield Mystics. We've got the Transcendent Envoys, where aura spells and enchantment spells cost us less and less and less. For all of you out there that are used to watching my videos, you know that I say one thing about discounters, things that give you a discount on your spells. And that is that they are best when you're casting multiple spells a turn. So one of the things that we want to be trying to do here is absolutely pooping out our hand. We want to cast 2 or 3 auras in a turn and ideally drawing cards off the back of that. So we want to include some more Enchantress pieces in this list, because by default, this list doesn't have things like Enchantress's Presence. Enchantress's Presence. Enchantress's Presence is a simple enchantment. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. It is in the list by default. Yes, it is in the list by default. I can't read. But we want more of those effects. Those draw a card on aura cast or on enchantment cast. The more we can do that, then the more Danitha, the more Transcendent Envoy, the more Starfield Mystic do for us. Now, Soul, we could add in more aura discounters in here, absolutely. But again, at 3 mana and lower, we have 4 already. I don't think that we need to add in more. What we need to do is we need to make sure that when we cast 1, 2, 3, 4 spells a turn, we're refilling our hand off of that. That's really what we want to be doing. Okay? Now, there are some cards in here that aren't really that necessary. Tithe Taker is an okay card, but not necessary to our game plan. These are things that I would cut. Okay? Eidolon of Blossoms absolutely is an include for this deck. So Eidolon of Blossoms is already in the list by default. We want to try and pump that up. Okay, so we've got Enchantress's Present, we've got Eidolon of Blossoms. Some of the white Enchantress draw card effects, like Femerith Enchantress, or Enchantress. Femerith Enchantress, Mesa Enchantress, Verdant Enchantress. These are the ones that we want in, that aren't in the list right now. Right? Argothian Enchantress is, of course, the big expensive one, because it's only 2 mana as opposed to 3 mana. But the others are 3 mana. Okay, so Mesa Enchantress and Verduran Enchantress are our first adds. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. They do the same thing, they're just color shifted. The ad that we can put in here is Femerith Enchantress. Femerith Enchantress is a $25 card. And it is whenever an enchantment is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. This is a safety net for when getting blown out. It does serve a purpose for your enchantment creatures, too, because it's just an enchantment, not necessarily an aura. So when your enchanted enchantment creatures go to the graveyard, when they die, you draw a card. There's a reason why this is a $25 card. I would not recommend we put it in the deck in the upgrade, but if we are looking to go upgrade plus and spend some money on this list, Femerith Enchantress is the way to go. Absolutely a house. Should be an include. Okay, so we've added in Mesa Enchantress, Verduran Enchantress. Now we have 4 or so ways where if we poop out all of the enchantments out of our hand, we're redrawing cards. We're drawn. Okay, that's the way to do it. The other thing that we should be doing is trying to cheat out enchantments. Is Satyr Enchantress in the deck? Say it's Satyr. Satyr Enchanter is the one. It is not in the list. It should be in the list. Thank you for calling that out too. But it does the same thing. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. This way, again, we can rapid fire through our deck. With all of these discounters in here, if we have 2 of them out, all of these 3 mana enchantments cost 1 mana. Pop, pop, pop. But yes, very good call. Very good call. All right. Now, Tanglespan Lookout, brand new, out of Wilds of Eldraine, does almost the same thing, but it's just auras, not all enchantments. Okay, so again, we've got tons of ways to really get the benefit. All right, let's take a look at Calyx then. A couple of recommendations. Calyx Guided by Fate, $15 right now. So a little out of our price range for a single include, but definitely could be included in the upgrade if you're looking to spend some money. It is Constellation, so whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, right, whenever Calyx or another enchantment enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and then whenever Calyx or an enchanted creature you control deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of a non-legendary enchantment you control. That is really good. Calyx would make a fantastic pivot commander for the deck, but $15 is a little much to recommend right now. Yeah, great recommendations from chat for a couple of the on-damage card draw effects, like Keen Sense and Sixth Sense. I think that those are good adds, but right now let's cut some of these unnecessary creatures. Like I mentioned before, Ox Drover, not necessary in the list. It's fun, but not necessary. A Johnny's Chosen is okay in the list. Makes you creatures whenever you cast an enchantment spell or whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield. If that enchantment is an aura, you can attach it to the token. Okay? Still good. Right? Pretty decent. We've got Shalai, Voice of Plenty, Celestial Archon. I think Celestial Archon is kind of on the upper range of what we want in this deck. Flying First Strike, Bestow to give something else flying in First Strike. +4/+4 flying in First Strike. I think that's good, but for 7, it's a little much. Honestly, I'd cut the Celestial Archon. Okay, same with Realm Cloak Giant. Realm Cloak Giant is big. It's a board wipe. Destroy all non-giant creatures. However, you only have one other giant creature in the deck, so it's not a shapeable board wipe. And honestly, not worth having it. Otherwise, it's just a 7/7 tramp or a 7/7 vigilance. And we're looking to build big creatures, not cast big creatures. Okay. We also have Sir Armont, the Redeemer, a 5-mana 4/4. Whenever Sir Armont, the Redeemer, enters the battlefield, create a monster roll token attached to another target creature you control. And enchanted creatures you control get +1/+1. Fantastic. Fantastic. Eidolon of Countless Battles is in the deck by default. I think that this is one of the best bestow creatures that we have out there, especially for this list, because it does give the enchanted creature +1/+1 for each creature you control and each aura you control. So, real good. Okay. But I like this list of creatures. I think that we could probably cut it down a little bit more. But honestly, I struggle to say whether this works or not, whether these creatures work or not. Sithis Harvest Hand, good call. Sithis, I typically see as being her own commander, but she absolutely fits in the 99 here. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, gain a life and draw a card. She's essentially these enchantresses that we've added to the deck on steroids. Real good include. Good call. Bam. Again, I always think of her as her own commander rather than in the 99 of a deck. Okay. Yeah. So some recommendations for auras to add. I know that we've only got room for one right now, so let's continue to cut some of this. For some of our sorceries, we've got that Austere Command. We've got Winds of Wrath, which is a shapeable board wipe, meaning destroy all creatures that aren't enchanted. So we can turn this into a one-sided board wipe if we have all of our creatures enchanted. When I say shapeable board wipe, that's what I mean. We get to choose what we're destroying. Something like the new Expel the Interlopers, for instance, the buy a box promo from Wilds of Eldraine, is a shapeable board wipe. We get to control it, we get to control what goes, and we can make it one-sided. I prefer those to general board wipe. General board wipe. All right, we've got great removal like Source of Plowshare and Get Generous Gift in here. I like the new Stroke of Midnight. And honestly, it's a bit of a surprise to me that in an Eldraine Precon, we get Generous Gift over Stroke of Midnight in the list by default. Stroke of Midnight is basically Generous Gift, except it can't hit lands, but only makes your opponent a 1/1 as opposed to a 3/3. Right? I like it just for the utility. Honestly, I'd include it just for that. Right? Great removal. Now, I see some recommendations out there. Why don't we cut the mana rocks in favor of land enchanting auras? Joel, buddy, that's because there are only 2 mana rocks in the list already, straight out of the box. Soul Ring and Arcane Signet. Otherwise, we've got Utopia Sprawl. We've got Fertile Ground. Get Soul Ring and Arcane Signet out of there. Arcane Signet, honestly, I'm pretty okay with losing, but Soul Ring, unless you've got a deck where you can't use multiple colorless mana, I'm keeping Soul Ring in. Soul Ring is still the best turn 1 play in any list ever. Okay? But in terms of our other enchantments, we've got some real good ones in here by default. Ones that we're enchanting to opponents' creatures, like Kenra's Transformation, and ones that we're enchanting to ours, like Spectral Steel. Okay? There are a few that can honestly be cut. Okay? Verdant Embrace. Verdant Embrace is cute, not a good card. +3/+3, and at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 green sapperling creature. I know that we want to be going wide in this deck, but this really isn't the way to do it. Right? Pollen Bright Wings is just enchanted creature has flying, but when it deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green sapperlings. Again, we're going wide in this deck. We want to be enchanting each of those sapperlings. However, Gilwain, the easiest way to enchant each of those sapperlings, can't enchant token creatures. So while it's cute to be able to smack somebody in the air for big amounts of damage and make a bunch of sapperlings, those sapperlings really aren't helping us with our go wide game plan. JJ, what do I think about Sun Titan? Honestly, I love Sun Titan in every deck. If you have spells that are under 3 mana, Sun Titan goes in the list. Easy as that. Because if he gets to attack once, he's paid for himself. Right? He enters the battlefield, returns 3 mana value or less, gets to attack, returns a 3 mana value or less, he's paid for himself. Sun Titan is a stalwart, and you'll find me putting him in every whitelist that I can. But on the matter of Pollen Bright Wings, again, it's cute to make a bunch of sapperlings, but they're not going to get us where we want them. Okay, Giant Inheritance. This is another new one. I missed this one in my first walkthrough, but 5 mana, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +5/+5, and whenever this creature attacks, create a monster roll token attached to up to 1 target attacking creature. Then when it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return it to your hand. Okay? Now, this helps solve some of those 2-for-1 issues that I was talking about with auras. Because this has the Rancor line of text on it. When it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return it to its owner's hand. It is 5 mana, but note that it is only 1 colored pip. And those 4 generic mana can be discounted by all of our generic mana discounting spells. This one is really, really good. Okay? Again, it helps enchant the rest of your creatures. It makes your creature bigger. I wish it gave it trample. But you can't attach that monster roll token. Oh, you can attach it to itself. I thought it was one other attacking. You can attach it to itself. So this is throw it on a creature that can attack, put the monster roll token on itself, and suddenly it's a 6/6 trampler. And then each other attacker, or each other combat, you get to put a token on another attacker. Real good. I like this one a lot. A lot. Could this be a Boon Weaver Giant deck? Yes. I typically like to hold off on a lot of tutors, especially in a deck like this, where we are essentially putting in a 2-card infinite combo in it, with Shielded by Faith that we talked about as an ad. I think that makes things just a little too consistent, but is still good. But we also wanted to put in Eldrazi Conscription. Now this is probably the most expensive single ad that I would recommend to the list by default. Eldrazi Conscription. It's a $13 card, and look at that secret layer art. Woo, that's something. But it is essentially what we want to be cheating out. With all of our discounted cards, with all of the ways that we can be cheating out enchantments and auras, Eldrazi Conscription is fantastic. It's probably going to be a game ender more often than not. All right. Now, with that being said, we can make another small ad and put in something like Rancor. Rancor is another one of those enchantments that solves the 2-for-1 issue. In that, when Rancor is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you return it to its owner's hand. This is something that we could do in attaching Rancor to a small token creature, sending that creature into die, returning the enchantment to our hand, and casting it again to get all of our card draw effects, get all of our enchantress effects. This essentially means that we can be casting an enchantment spell every single turn. Okay, and that is really good. The fact that it gives +2/+0 and trample to the enchanted creature, again, incredible. Absolutely fantastic. Griff's Boon. Griff's Boon is another good one and another one that I really like, but we've got this Spectral Steel in the list. Spectral Steel can return any other aura from our graveyard to our hand. Okay? Griff's Boon, yes, we can cast out of the graveyard, but this is another way to recur things. Okay? I like Griff's Boon. I really do. But I think that we're a little tight on space here. Unless we're looking to cut some more cards. Still good. SRAM is a good call for additional card draw, too. But I think with the volume of card draw that we have in here right now, what we really want to do is we want creatures that are to be enchanted. And we've got a few of those. However, they're usually at the 4 mana value plus level. Yeah, Muffins, again, I said the same thing. The smaller creatures that we'd want to be enchanting here, we want to be hexproof by default. Joel, we're running 39 lands. That's because our average mana value is over 3 right now. If we want to bring that down to 3, I'd be safe cutting a couple of lands. Maybe going down to 37. But we'd have to be adding in some smaller mana value creatures, some smaller mana value auras. All right. Yeah, I think SRAM is a good ad. I don't disagree. SRAM Senior Edificer. I've got a brew for him on the channel that I did just a couple of weeks ago. But whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. Easy enough. And I also like the Armored Sky Hunter that I spoke about previously. So Armored Sky Hunter is a 4 mana 3/3 flyer. When it attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put an aura or equipment card from among them onto the battlefield. If an equipment is put onto the battlefield this way, attach it to a creature you control. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So we've got one of the Danithas in here. We've got Danitha Capuchin. But Core Spirit Dancer is in the list by default. All right? Yep. Core Spirit Dancer is in the list. Okay. So, again, I think that we've got a good list here. We need 2 more cuts is the only thing. And then I want to run a couple of sample hands before we get to our big surprise after the stream. All right. So, yeah, the Danitha from Aftermath. I get that. I think that we've got enough creatures. 31 creatures in the list is great. Ideally, I'd want to cut a couple of creatures from the list, too, to strike more of a balance between creatures and enchantment in the deck. Okay, so Timber Paladin is a new one in the deck, too. I glossed over this. But as long as it's enchanted by one aura, it's a 3/3. As long as it's enchanted by two, it's a 5/5. And if it's enchanted by three or more, it's a 10/10. This is the kind of thing that we want for creatures to be enchanted with. The ones that incentivize being enchanted. Same with Gnarlid here. Creatures with power less than it can't block, and it gets +1/+1 for each aura on the battlefield. Fantastic. But we could be adding in creatures that have hexproof by default, so they can't be destroyed by targeted removal. Again, if that's the case, what I would do is I would start cutting from the higher end of the list. Liberated Livestock goes, Sun Titan goes, Ajani's Chosen goes, and we essentially become a Voltron deck where we're building up our own creatures. Okay. Well, okay, let's look at Danitha for everybody's reference. New Benalia's Light, a 3-mana 2/2 human knight, vigilant trample lifelink, love keyword soup. Once during each of your turns, you may cast an aura or equipment spell from your graveyard. You know what? I like that a lot. Part of the reason why I like that a lot is that I really like Luris of the Dream Den, who lets you do essentially the same thing, but only for small mana value spells. I usually use that to cast auras out of my graveyard anyway. And you know what, Sam? I think you got a point. When you're on the ball, you're on the ball, but Danitha New Benalia's Light is a good ad for the list. Good call. All right. So what I do here is I would cut something like Liberated Livestock, even though it's got that cheat and aura out for us ability on it. If we're reducing the mana value in the deck, the curve of the deck, to remove a land or two to get us down to 37, it's honestly a cut. Okay. Indomitable Might, again, while it's good, it's a flash aura, +3/+3. Enchanted creature's controller may have it assign combat damage as though it weren't blocked. It's super trample. Not the band Super Trample, but Super Trample. It's good. Is it necessary in the list? Probably not. Okay. Again, I think that it's good, but I think that it's skippable. Muffin's great point. We don't have any sacrifice effects. We don't have any aristocrats effects. We can't control when the livestock is dying. We need to wait for somebody to try and destroy it or a board wipe to happen. Okay. Now, honestly, Ajani's Chosen, while we do want to be going wide and we do want to be enchanting those tokens that it's making, probably skippable too. Especially if we want to bring the mana value in the list down. We want to be cutting anything over 4, or a lot of the non-necessary auras over 4. Okay, and with all of the card draw that we've added into the deck, I didn't even realize Citizen Champion was in here, one of the best Enchantress effects ever. We could likely be cutting the new Tangle Span Lookout whenever an aura enters the battlefield and your control draw a card. Maybe. You know what? We're going to keep it. Value's value. Right? So I'm really struggling on what further to cut here. We have managed to cut a whole 0.5 from the mana value, the average mana value of the deck. You know what? We might be able to cut Rishkar's Expertise. So Rishkar's Expertise is great, but it really wants you to build up a single big creature, as opposed to going wide like our commanders in this list want to do. And because we've added in so much card draw on cast in this list, we can safely cut Rishkar's Expertise. It's a 6 mana value spell, and at 6 mana value, we want to be casting 1, 2, or 3 auras in a single turn. Okay, so let's cut Rishkar's Expertise. You know, apart from that, I think I like the way that that is looking. I really do. And this brings our list down to the 3.05 in terms of average mana value. Now, if we cut a land or two, if we cut 1 forest and 1 plains, get down to a safe 37. I like 37 for a 3 average mana value. Right? Still at that 3.05. This gives us room for 3 more spots in the list. What card would I be interested in without a budget restriction? I mentioned Femorif Enchantress. Femorif Enchantress, probably the best single add to a list like this. A great way to recover after something like a board wipe or a blowout in combat. Replenish is a good one too. Shout out to Joel for that one. The $86 Replenish. We did talk about the Calyx from Aftermath being a $15 card. Good add. Not something that I include in the list by default, but still real good. What I would also add to this list with some of our additional spots, again, any of the 1 mana value hexproof creatures go in here. Right? We're very heavy on the 1 and 2 mana value creatures because that's where a lot of our discounters come from. But Muffins, exactly, Glade Cover Scout. Right? So Glade Cover, just a 1/1 with hexproof. Ledgewalker, Edging. Silhana Ledgewalker, again, 2 mana, but hexproof and can't be blocked except for creatures with flying. Again, this is what we want to be throwing our auras onto. They self-protect themselves. They can't be taken out by targeted removal. Okay, love it. I'd like to add in at least 1 more enchantment in here so that we're an even 22. So what is the best, most basic that we can put in here? But Wild Growth. Wild Growth, good old enchanted land adds another green mana. Okay. Of the land-based or the land aura-based ramps that we have in here, we've got Utopia Sprawl, which we get to choose the color and add. Fertile Ground, which means the land that's tapped for mana adds an additional land of any color. And then Wild Growth, which just adds a green. I think that those are great. Triggers all of our spells. We could be casting a Wild Growth and drawing 3 cards, thanks to our Enchantress effects. Okay, now I didn't take too close of a look at the land base. We do have yucky Myriad Landscape. Yucky poo poo, get out of here. All right. What else do we have? Everything else looks pretty good. Sungrass Prairie, I'm not a fan of the filter lands, largely because they don't do anything on turn 1. We do have turn 1 spells in the list. And Temple of Plenty, I'd cut 2. In this case, let's add in 3 more lands. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, back up to 37, an even split of 15 and 15, considering we're at 50% of each, white and green. Thank you, Moxfield. We've now brought our mana curve below 3. Congratulations, fam. And we've got this beautiful, beautiful mana curve, as some of you are saying as well. We ramp up very nicely. We ramp down very nicely. I love it. I love it. I think what we've done is we've switched out about 10 cards in the list. We've definitely made some improvements. Fantastic call, Muffins. All That Glitters isn't in here. Didn't All That Glitters just get a reprint too? All That Glitters is a fantastic aura that says enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control. A great way to pump up your kicks, as it were. All right, I like it. I like it. Let's cut one more thing from in here. Yeah, just got downshifted to common. Great. Ethereal Armor's already in the list by default. Honestly, I would shame Wizards till the end of time if they didn't include Ethereal Armor in an aura-based list by default. It is probably the first add whenever somebody's doing any kind of Voltron auras enchantments build. Right. So what are we going to cut for All That Glitters? We're going to cut this Tangle Span Lookout. I know, I'm sorry, Tangle Span Lookout. Goodbye. Okay, still fine. It's a good card. It's just probably the least interesting of our Enchantress effects. Right? But you can see, I think I've mentioned this before in doing my breakdown of Voltron and enchantment builds like this, enchantress builds, the biggest benefit is that you have redundancy. You see how many mana cost reducers we have in this list. You see how many draw a card on enchantment casts we have in this list. That means that this deck is consistent. Redundancy equals consistency. So the more cards you have that do a thing, the more reliably you'll have the effect that lets you do the thing. If you want a fun, go wides, aura-centric deck, I think that this one is great. I've only added about $15 to the list. We've only changed about 10 cards, maybe 15 cards in the list. But what we've done is we've taken it to a place where you can reliably do the thing. I think Elevere still works as the commander in this list. But as we spoke on the outset, Giltwain does perfectly fine as the commander of this list. Potentially, we could have Siona as commander of this list too, because we have included Shielded by Faith for that 2-card infinite combo. We did add Danitha New Benalia's Light into the deck too. She would make a fine pivot commander as well. I think that this is one of those decks where you could say at the outset of any game, I'm going to choose my commander at random. And your deck would do the same thing. You could swap Sithis in at the head of this list. You've got 5 potential commanders in this deck. And if you swap them out completely randomly, the deck would work. The deck would work regardless of who the commander is. All right? Fantastic. Fantastic. All right, well, we've got a special surprise for everybody who's joining me live coming up. But for everybody who is watching the VOD on YouTube, please check out the list linked below at my sponsor, Moxfield. Moxfield is, of course, the best deck building platform in the world. Follow my profile while you're there to get all of my brews and be able to get all of my lists. Please also make sure to check out my sponsor at Face to Face Games. Use my code MECHANIC for 5% off of any of your orders, including anything new from Wilds of Eldraine. And if I have missed anything in this list that you feel is a slam dunk include, let me know in the comments below. And of course, while you're here, check out any of these other brews on the channel. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you were inspired by this list. And of course, as always, folks, good luck and have fun.